Hello again, and welcome to the latest edition of ConFusion, Still Confusing, a virtual element of ConFusion, a fan convention held in January in Novi, Michigan. Today I have with me writer and publisher Storm Humbert to talk with me about crowdfunding. Thank you for being with me here today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about what are the advantages of crowdfunding for projects.
Well, one of the advantages, depending on the project, for publishing specifically, is that you have minimal upfront costs. You have to get art, you have to have that art made into graphics for you. If you don't have someone that can do that for you, those are upfront costs. But you're not, for example, if you're doing anthologies like we do, you're not paying authors ahead of time, you're not buying more stories ahead of time. You're only doing those things if you get the money. So uh, it prevents you from fronting a bunch of costs to then sell later. It's pretty much a pre-sale mechanism to have people invested in your project and want the thing you're doing before you actually have to go and do it.
And what are some of the platforms that people are using for crowdfunding these days?
Well, mostly it's Kickstarter.
Okay.
For especially for publishing stuff, it's mostly Kickstarter. There are some other, I mean, GoFundMe is an option that allows you to get partial funding, like whatever you do raise, you get to keep. Kickstarter is all or nothing. But just because the Kickstarter community has a significant like literary block in it, or readership block, I think most people still tend to go with Kickstarter.
That's fair. So, how do you calculate out your minimum goals and your stretch goals for a project?
So your minimum goal, what you want is um, you want to make sure that you set your minimum goal at the absolute smallest amount that you can make that project real for. In our case, we usually recruit anchor authors. So our funding goal will include how much we're paying them. And then it will include for our recent projects, like the last one, the one I edited, which was our previous project, Intergalactic Rejects, it was also funding for a certain amount of words purchased from an open call from a slush pile. We're doing that with this one as well. So you're funding for, we needed to fund for the number of anchor authors we have, plus a certain amount of words from the slush pile. That may end up being, anywhere from 15 to 20 titles, but it's a certain number of words. It can change with how much the stories, with how long the stories are. Um, so you calculate that because you know what you're paying for a per word rate. Like for our previous ones, we started off at 4 cents a word, and our stretch goals were to pay our slush pile authors more per each stretch goal. And Kickstarter community is generally pretty on board with that. They like helping you pay your authors more when you're doing anthologies, collections, things like that. This one, we decided that we just don't like paying less than 8 cents a word. So our base funding for our current project, which is the Misfits anthology, is it just takes into account that we're going to pay 8 cents a word. If we fund, that's the lowest we're comfortable paying. So we didn't want to, because we've had two successful Kickstarters to this point, we wanted to build on that success and just as our minimum goal, like we're going to pay 8 cents a word. We're not going to regress in terms of our pay scale. So that's part of our base now is we're saying we are paying 8 cents a word, which means our base is higher now, but the base for this project is still lower than what we ultimately got for our previous project, Intergalactic Rejects. Um, so you calculate all those costs. If when you're doing books, you have to if you're doing print on demand for fulfillment, which I recommend, you're gonna look up how much it costs to print and ship to whatever countries you're doing. For your first project, I recommend you only do the US, Canada, and Mexico to keep your shipping relatively simple and straightforward. And you take all of those costs, recoup any art costs that you have or formatting costs, or graphics costs that you have going in, put those in there. Then you need to add 10% because Kickstarter takes 5%, and then Stripe, who processes your payments, takes 4%. So you just round up, you take 10%, and then I recommend adding another 10% just for a buffer because some some rewards don't contribute as much to your bulk funding because they have certain costs associated with them.
Mhm.
Um, like printing and shipping for books, whereas ebooks, the cost for that is to subscribe to a fulfillment service, a distribution service, which we usually use BookFunnel for that. It's very easy. It's very easy to use.
Okay.
Um, so you take all those costs, you add the 10% to account for what Kickstarter takes and what Stripe takes, and then 10% more just to give yourself a buffer for costs going up. Because from when you start to when you fulfill, printing costs could go up, shipping costs could go up. Um, all kinds of things can increase in price. And so giving yourself another little cushion, I think, is necessary to make sure you don't have an overage in terms of owing more than you collect. And so you end up losing money on something.
Yeah, that would defeat the goal. Although I will say I am very happy, 8 cents a word as a writer. That we're always happy when people are increasing the rate that they're paying writers.
Mhm. Yeah, we try to be a very writer-friendly market because at Calendar of Fools, all of our projects have something where we're trying to help the writing community and also create a product that readers will enjoy. Like our first anthology, Inner Workings, it was short stories with craft essays to help aspiring writers. Like you'd read a story, and then the craft essay written by that author would kind of take the story apart and explain how they achieved a certain effect or built a certain thing. So it's helping writers grow in their craft. In Neglected Rejects, the goal was to help authors deal with rejection, especially in the short story area. There's tons and tons of rejections, so we wanted to kind of make a physical thing that writers could own and be like, I just got 3 rejections this month or whatever, and then go and look at that book and say all these stories were rejected, anywhere from 3 to 70 times before they got accepted. And these are all really good stories. So my story could be this good and still get rejected, and that's fine. And with this one, the goal is a little more simpler in that by making the stories shorter and of awkward lengths, we wanted to, one, give a fun challenge to writers to write in this awkward length kind of space, but also just allow us to buy more stories, to publish more different authors, and give their work a place, um, with, being headlined by more well-known, more successful authors who are further in their career. So get some more eyes on more authors' work is kind of the goal with this one.
Very cool. So what sort of things can you do before you make a campaign go live to prepare, besides the
Um,
budgeting and planning?
you should do as much as you possibly can. You don't want to be dealing with coming up with new material or finding new rewards or any of that stuff during the actual campaign. You want to have all of that planned out. You want to know what freebies you have to give away to use as incentives. You want to know what stretch goals you have in mind. In our case, for the current, like I said, in the past, stretch goals had been to increase our pay rate or include other content. Like Intellectual Rejects got a forward from Neil Clark as one of our stretch goals. But for this one, our stretch goals are simply, once we fund, our first stretch goal is to buy 5 more stories. Then our next stretch goal is to be able to buy 5 more stories after that. So it's to make this bigger and include more and more authors at that professional pay rate.
So how do you make your crowdfunding look professional or stand out when we have such a crowded field of projects out there?
Graphics are big. You want to make sure you have professional looking artwork to showcase what you're selling, so let people understand what they'll be getting. For books, particularly, you want to have professional looking cover art. You want to make sure you have someone doing like David Elsenson, who's editing our current project, does our graphics. This is what he does professionally in his day job. So we have somebody on staff that does that for us. But if you don't, you want to find somebody who can give you professional looking graphics that are appropriate, not just for Kickstarter, but for all your social media platforms that you're going to be posting on because they have different dimensions that are optimal for them.
Mhm.
You want to make sure that you always have visually optimized graphics for wherever you're putting them. You want to make sure that your story does a good job of not just explaining to people what they get, but the Kickstarter community really wants to feel like they're supporting something that makes them feel good and is doing something more than just the project. Which is why, for us, our brand of we're helping authors and we're creating projects for readers. We're doing both things. Trying to um, pay it forward for, as authors in our career, we've had older, more successful authors help us. We want to help the next generation of authors and so on and so forth. So you want to communicate that, like, what is the greater purpose of what you're doing? Um, what is the value beyond the thing itself? You want to make sure that's in your story. You want to know how to communicate the multifaceted value of your project to the Kickstarter community, which is including your inspiration for it, what you're hoping to achieve with it, and why it's important to you and might be important to others. You also want to make sure that your reward list is well thought out, that it's tiered in a pretty sensible way. But also, I generally encourage people to offer one really big reward, like something that's really expensive and that's the highest tier. Think of something really big that you can do that someone might want. Um, for one, it gives you an opportunity to make a big chunk off of one thing. But the other thing is it creates a something called an anchoring bias, which is when people see a very expensive thing that's available, they feel better about purchasing less expensive things. So you want to think of one really big reward that you can offer, um, because it will help even the down ticket items to be more appealing. Um, you also want to do things like arrange for cross promotion. If you know people who are running a Kickstarter or any crowdfunding, any campaign the same time as you want to try to feed off each other's backer pool, like cross-pollinate your projects and the support from people who are clearly interested in books. If you're interested in A, you might be interested in B. So if find people you know who are running, and if you know people who run them, try to run at the same time or have some overlap so you can do that cross promo. Set all that stuff up ahead of time. I mean, yes, you'll once you launch, you'll always have some things that come to like with our last project, we had an opportunity for a cross promo that we didn't anticipate that just popped up for us. And so we took advantage of that and we did that. But try to do as much as you possibly can to account for and finish as much as you possibly can before you launch the project at all. Because once you launch, it's very much about tracking how you're doing. And when you find you're falling behind pace, coming up with, marketing approaches or promotional strategies to try to get more people's eyes on the project, uh, get back on track. It's much more about keeping eyes on the project, keeping energy on the project and not losing momentum. You don't want to be worrying about, we need a graphic or also do a video. Videos are so helpful for your project. Make sure you do one.
So,
Yeah.
what kind of promotion, you're saying cross promoting and videos? Are there any other promotion things that really work or maybe really don't work?
Well, don't pay for ads, and once you launch, you'll get a ton of spam, people saying that they'll promise eyes on your thing or help you fund or all this and that. They're almost 100% scams. And the ones that aren't outright scams are they're not worth the money. Um, just use social media, use your sphere, have your friends post about it. And also, when you post, don't just post to say, hey, look at my thing, come give me money. You want to post because you're providing value and opportunity. You want to post about something like, a new temporary reward is available. Come back to get this now. Or one thing we just launched today, it'll run the whole campaign is anyone who refers somebody and they end up backing the account, they'll each get a bonus reward, a bonus ebook. And
Cool.
all they'll have to do on the survey is we'll make a box and they'll put each other's names down and then they'll both get the thing. And then this person who was referred could refer somebody else, and that person will also get the thing by putting their name in a certain box. So promotional things like that, where you have a freebie to give away, but it comes with it's an incentive. It's you want to get another free ebook in addition to because we also have ebooks for people who back in the first 5 days. And we also and that's a novel from one of our anchor authors. They'll get a free ebook of that if they back in the first 5 days. And that's Aaron Rosenberg. And then we have another novel from him that they'll get a different free ebook if they're one of our first 100 backers. So those are time sensitive promotional devices that help get people in on the ground floor and get them in soon because you want that early swell of backers to kind of carry you forward because the more momentum you have throughout, the easier it is to maintain that and finish and reach your goal. If you level off or sometimes it can seem like if you don't get close enough to your goal by a certain point, people lose interest because they don't want to back a project or select something for a project that's not going to go through the time, I guess, of if they don't think it's going to come because then they won't get the reward and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, you want to use promotional devices like that, like freebies and other incentives, to promote and to incentivize people to come look at your project and get something because they're going to get more value if they do X or participate by Y date. Things like that. But also, and that's why we do anthologies. Also, a big part of promotion is because we have anchor authors and people who are associated with the project from the get-go, they amplify the project because they'll post about it on their socials. So we get different people's social circles seeing the project. So I think anthologies have a really kind of easier route to leverage social media because they have so many more people involved from the start. So yeah, just use your social media. Don't overwhelm people with, shouting about it multiple times a day. Only do posts on your official channels or do updates when you have something new to report, or information to convey, like a new reward or a new incentive, things like that. Don't just bomb people with, hey, this thing's available, come give me money. Like have a reason, have information to communicate.
Yeah. And then say that your Kickstarter has funded and you're working with fulfillment. You mentioned book funnel, but are there any other tips and tricks you have on how you can make fulfillment maybe less of a logistical nightmare?
Well, I recommend doing print on demand services, whether that's Ingram or Amazon. Find which one makes the most sense for you. But that and just do straight drop shipping to the person. Yes, it's way more data entry. I thankfully don't have to deal with that. John handles our fulfillment. So he manually enters all the different shipping information to send author copies, contributor copies to everybody who backed the Kickstarter. It is a lot of data entry, but it's still ultimately, I feel, less work than having it all shipped to you and printing shipping labels, stuffing envelopes, putting it back in the mail. It is cheaper to do it that way. But you can also just roll the shipping costs into the reward tier. There's a place where you charge your backers for shipping. So I recommend doing that. Drop ship, ship direct from Amazon to the person. Uh, if you are doing signed copies, if that's something you're offering, then you will have to do the ship to me and I ship it out part. But as much as you can, drop ship from Amazon, or Ingram, whichever one is better for you. Fulfill ebooks through BookFunnel. That's the one that we're most familiar with that we use the best. It's actually the only one I know of. I'm sure there are plenty of other ones, but BookFunnel has been really easy to use for us. For us, I think we generally just pay for a month subscription to distribute, but it's not just available for a month. All of our backers permanently, like, it's that book is associated with the email address they gave us. So whenever they go to BookFunnel, they'll get that book. So BookFunnel is very easy to use. So yeah, BookFunnel and dropship from either Amazon or Ingram, that'll make your life a whole lot easier. If you are offering things like special like textured covers, like high-end page designs, they might not be able to do that. I don't know. We just do standard trade paperbacks. But if you're just doing standard, well, they can do hardcovers too. But if you're doing a standard book, uh, I say drop ship it and make it easier on yourself.
Is there any other advice that you'd have for anybody who is planning to start a crowdfunding?
Well, one thing, and I forgot to say it during the promotional part, but you want to make sure you're not just promoting during, you want to have a solid 2 months of pretty consistent promotion leading up to your launch. We don't like to launch our projects with less than ideally 100 followers on them. Um, This time we launched with closer to 75, which I wasn't super happy about, but that's still okay. You want to do your promotion ahead of time so people already have eyes so that they'll get alerted as soon as you launch. You can get those really early backers. and build some momentum really quickly. So you want to make sure you're promoting 2 months, at least 2 months ahead of time, lead up to launch. Um, you also want to, so just thinking, oh, as many things as you can do that don't cost you money, but maybe just cost you time to add value, whether it's a reward tier or an add-on. For example, we sell critiques. We're all award-winning authors. So we will sell critiques. People can just send us a story and we will give them a detailed critique of their work. We arrange it so that that critique can be for a story they plan to submit to the open call, because we make sure we don't start the open call until we finished our critiques. So we can sell that. It costs us time. It doesn't cost us money. That's something we can do to add value without adding cost. Um, Similarly, things like we're offering Tuckerizations, so someone can pay to have a character named after them in one of our anchor author stories. It doesn't cost us any time. It doesn't cost us, actually, it doesn't cost Calendar of Fools any time at all. It just costs our anchor author a little time changing a character's name from one thing to another. If you have a backlist, like we have two anthologies now, we offer those as add-ons, um, both in ebook and paperback formats. So previous work you've done, make use of it. Um, if you have anchor author, if you're doing an anthology like we do, see if any of your anchor authors or just people you know have, if anyone you know or an anchor author has a series that they own or distribute or what have you, that they are free to give ebook access to. The first book was, I think Kevin J. Anderson told me once, and I don't know if somebody told him, I don't know if it's an original, but he said once you have a second book in a series, the first book is an ad. So if it's a series and you can, find a way to get a lot of people to read the first book, you can increase your sales of the second book. So if they have a series and they are willing to give you the first book as a freebie, that's something you then have to use as an incentive that we talked about before, some kind of giveaway, um, or a bonus to add value that doesn't add money. So look for ways to add value without adding cost is another big thing. I'm sure there's a lot more that I have. Um,
I think we're just barely scratching the surface on crowdfunding, but this has been really, really informative.
yeah, I mean, don't necessarily make all of your stretch goals about increasing the complexity of the project. They don't always need to do that. It can push out your fulfillment time. It can not scale as you thought. It can end up costing more than you thought. So really make sure that you know exactly how much the things you're going to do are going to cost. And, like I said, we've done things before like increasing our pay scale. That's just math. We can just say, this is how much we're increasing 1 cent per word at this stretch goal. So this is how much more it will cost us per word that we've already promised to buy. Um, that's really easy math to do, but there are plenty of things that, like for example, when magazines crowdfund, sometimes they will part of their stretch goals will be for more issues in that calendar year, which just reduces the amount of time they have to build a subscriber base to become self-sufficient and not use Kickstarter. They should just fund for, this stretch goal allows us to print this many issues, but not necessarily crammed into a calendar year. Just we have more issues before we have to crowdfund again.
Mhm.
So things like that don't always cram more into now. Sometimes, depending on what your project is, you can use that to stretch out, the solvency of whatever you're creating over a longer term. Uh, yeah.
Well, those are all really amazing things. Can you talk a little bit about the Kickstarter that you're running right now?
Yeah, so Misfits, we're in our third, yeah, today is the third day. We launched on Monday, and it is an anthology of stories of awkward lengths about things that are missing or out of place. All the stories that will be in there are between 1,200 and 2,100 words, which is a relatively uncommon length to see in most markets. I mean, there are stories that get published at that length. We had one in Intergalactic Rejects that was 1,900 words, so right in the middle there. Um, but there's just less of them, and it's a very unique range, like size of story. We feel that because of the constraints of places that want flash fiction generally cap at 1,000 words, and places that want short stories tend to want stories that are, more differentiable from flash fiction. So generally, you see them closer to a minimum of 2,000 words or so. You don't see a lot of them published between 15 and 2,000, 1,500 and 2,000. So we just wanted to see what authors would do if they were specifically knew they were operating at that length. So we think we'll get some really interesting, unique stories in there. And also again, because the cap is lower, because before for intergalactic rejects we allowed up to 5,000 words. This one's less than half. So we will be able to buy more stories and feature more titles from more new authors, which is something that's very important to us. And once, if assuming we reach our base funding goal, our stretch goals will be again to add even more stories from the slush pile. And we have our anchor authors for this are, I got them right here. Uh, R. Verdi, Rebecca Treasure, Jason Sanford, Aaron Rosenberg, Aaron Roberts, Shiv Ramdas, Sonny Moraine, Henry Hertz, and Rob Cameron. Um, and it's edited by David A. Elsenson, who is one of the owners of Calendar Fools, along with me.
Amazing. And where can we find you? And where can we find the project?
Well, our site, calendarfools.com, it has pages devoted to all of our projects, including the current one. So if you go to calendarfools.com and go to Misfits, which is the title of the current project, you'll be able to direct the Kickstarter from there. You can also look on Kickstarter for Misfits. That's MISSED-FITS. Subtitle is A Calendar of Fools Anthology. So you can find us there. And you can find Calendar of Fools, our small press, on Facebook, Bluesky, Twitter, and Instagram.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on here for this amazing discussion. Again, you can see more discussions like this at our ConFusion conventions in Novi, Michigan in January of most years. And all of our information for our next ConFusion is going to be at 2027.confusionsf.org. And we will have all the links to all the things in the description of this video. Thank you so much.
Thank you.